Join our community and dive into chilling horror tales that will steal your breath away. Subscribe, ring the notification bell, and brace yourself for a journey into the unknown. The autumn wind of 1834 carried a chill across the Kentucky hills. Dead leaves skittered over the dirt road like frightened insects, and the trees swayed in crooked silence as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The carriage wheels moaned against the rocks while the horse snorted uneasily, its breath fogging the dusk air. Inside the carriage sat a man whose name most townsfolk never dared to say aloud. Mr. Follings to the public, he was a benefactor, a savior of orphans left behind by fever and famine. He was the man who brought children into his sprawling estate on the hill when no one else would take them. Yet whenever his carriage rolled into a village, parents pulled their children close and the church bells fell into unnatural silence. It was as though his shadow dimmed the world around him. That evening he was not alone. Across from him in the carriage sat two small children, a boy with straw-colored hair and a girl with pale eyes, wide and unblinking. They did not speak. They did not weep. They sat with their backs straight and their little hands folded in their laps as if they had been taught long ago that noise meant punishment. The driver avoided looking back. He had seen too many children ride up that hill and never return. The estate appeared against the skyline like a black tooth in a rotting mouth. The rolling house was vast yet starved of warmth. Its roof sagged like tired shoulders. Its windows reflected no light, though candles burned within stone. Gargoyles crouched along the roofline, their eyes chipped yet watchful. The gates creaked open and the carriage passed into the courtyard where the ground was littered with feathers from unseen birds. The sound of the iron closing behind them was final, like a tomb ceiling. Inside the mansion, 12 children already lived under Follings' roof. None had birth certificates, none had records. It was as though they had been erased the moment they crossed the threshold. The housekeeper, an older woman with thin lips and gray hair tied in a severe knot, met them at the door. She did not greet the newcomers. She only gestured for them to follow her down the long corridor where the wallpaper peeled in strips and a damp smell seeped from the walls. Each step the children took echoed too loudly, as though the house were listening. At supper they were seated at a table too long for comfort. Candles flickered at uneven heights, their wax bleeding down the brass holders. The children ate, in silence, knives and spoons clinking in a rhythm that felt rehearsed. Not one child looked up. Not one child dared to speak, even when the new arrivals were seated among them. No words of welcome were exchanged. Across the table, one boy whose face was thin and sharp glanced at the newcomers for the briefest moment. His eyes carried something older than his age, something that whispered of nights without sleep and secrets buried under skin. He quickly looked back to his plate. Mr. Follings stood. At the head of the table he never ate. He only watched. His voice when it came was deep and deliberate. You are home now. You will not speak of where you came from. You will not speak of who you once were. Names are of no importance here. Obedience is all that matters. The children nodded as if their wills had long been broken. That night the new boy and girl were taken to their room. It was a narrow chamber with 2 small beds and a cracked mirror nailed to the wall. The mirror was too high for them to see their reflections, yet something about it made the girl uneasy. She lay awake long after the house fell silent, listening to the groans of the beams, the faint rustle of something moving inside the walls. Then she heard it, a whisper, from the mirror. Not in words she understood, but in a tone that chilled her blood. It was soft yet urgent, like the murmur of someone trapped behind glass. She squeezed her eyes shut, pulled the blanket over her head, and prayed it was only the wind. The whisper did not stop. It grew louder until it was not a sound in her ears but inside her bones. Her brother stirred in his bed as if dreaming. The candle in the hallway flickered and died, plunging their room into thick darkness. By morning, the girl would not speak of what she heard. She only stared at the mirror with hollow eyes, and when the housekeeper came to fetch them, her hands trembled so badly she could not hold her spoon at breakfast. Days passed. The children of the house lived as shadows. They were not taught letters or hymns. They were taught silence. They moved through the halls like sleepwalkers obeying invisible commands. At night, some scratched at their doors until their fingers bled as though trying to escape dreams that clung to them even in waking. One evening, the new boy followed a sound down the corridor. A soft weeping carried from the end of the hall where a locked door waited. The weeping was not like the voice of any child. It was older, deeper yet, somehow, trapped in endless sorrow. He pressed his ear to the wood and heard words breathed in ragged rhythm. They took our names, they took our faces. We are nothing. His heart thundered in his chest and he stumbled back, but before he could run, the housekeeper's hand clamped down on his shoulder. Her grip was iron, her eyes empty of kindness. "That room is never to be touched," she said in a voice that was not hers but something hollow. He nodded quickly and she released him, but as she turned away, he saw her reflection in the glass frame along the hall. It did not move with her. At supper that night, he tried to whisper to his sister what he had heard, but she shook her head sharply, eyes wide with terror. Beneath the candlelight, her lips barely moved as she breathed a warning. "They are listening. Do not speak." And from the head of the table, Mr. Follings smiled without showing his teeth, as if he already knew. The locked room. The moon sat pale above the Follings estate that night, its light struggling to break through the warped glass windows. Shadows bent unnaturally along the walls as if the house itself twisted them into shapes of its own choosing. The children lay in their rooms, silent as corpses, each one breathing shallow, as if afraid the darkness might hear them. The new boy could not sleep. The words from the locked door haunted him. They took our names. They took our faces. We are nothing. He sat upright in bed, his eyes fixed on the cracked mirror across the room. For a moment he thought. He saw his reflection smile, though his own lips had not moved. He bit back a cry, pressing his fists against his mouth until tears stung his eyes. Beside him, his sister tossed in her sleep, whispering nonsense words as though speaking to someone. Unseen hours dragged like chains until the silence of the house broke again. The weeping returned. This time it was closer. It seeped through the floorboards, rising into his very bones. The boy stood bare feet cold against the wood, his small body trembling. He opened the door and peered into the hall. A line of candle flames flickered one by one as if guiding him. He followed their path, heart pounding. The crying led him again to the forbidden door at the end of the corridor. Only now, the door was open, a thin black space yawning between the wood and the frame. He should have turned back, every part of him screamed to run, but something stronger pulled him forward like invisible hands pressing against his back. Inside the room was no furniture, no bed, no candle. Only walls streaked with something dark and a floor covered in strange chalk markings, circles, symbols, words carved deep, as though by fingernails. Not tools. In the center lay a pile of broken dolls. Their faces scratched their glass. Eyes gouged out. Among them rested a small shoe no larger than his hand. It was stained brown with something too old to still be blood. The boy backed away, but the door slammed shut behind him with a sound that shook the house. The weeping stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the voice itself. Then he heard whispers. Not one but many dozens overlapping each other like a chorus of forgotten souls. They came from the walls, the floor, the air. He turned in frantic circles, pressing his hands over his ears, but the voices only grew clearer inside his skull. They spoke of fires and burials, of children taken in darkness and erased from the world, of names burned from records and faces hidden from God. They spoke of Mr. Falling. The boy fell to his knees, sobbing, begging them to stop, but the whispers did not pity him. One voice rose above the rest, sharp as broken glass. "You will join us soon." Suddenly the room went dark, though he had not noticed a light to begin with. Something cold brushed his cheek like the touch of fingers that were not alive. He screamed, pounding on the door until it opened so suddenly he fell into the hall. The housekeeper stood above him, her face pale in the moonlight. Her eyes were not angry, but weary, as though she had seen this too many times before. "You must not listen to them," she whispered quickly. "If you listen too long, they take you." Her hand trembled as she helped him up. But before he could question her, Mr. Follings' voice echoed from the Stairwell back to your room. The boy froze. The master had not shouted yet. His voice carried like thunder rolling inside the bones of the house. The housekeeper bowed her head and hurried him away. In his bed, the boy curled against his sister, his tears wetting the blanket. She woke and touched his face with trembling hands. She did not ask what happened. She only whispered the words she had heard in her dream. They said, "We are already dead." Her voice cracked and her eyes stared not at him, but at the cracked mirror across the room. And in that glass they both saw it. Not their reflections, but 12 pale figures standing shoulder to shoulder, each one a child, their faces blurred, their mouths sewn shut. The candle by the door extinguished itself, as if blown by breath that came from nowhere, and the night stretched on without mercy. The morning sun broke through the clouds, yet the Follings estate did not brighten light. Touched its windows and seemed to die there, leaving the house in its own private dusk. The children gathered for breakfast, their faces pale, their eyes ringed with shadows, as if none had truly slept. The new boy and his sister sat in silence, bowls of porridge cooling before them. The night still clung to their skin. Every time the boy blinked, he saw flashes of the locked room, the chalk markings, the blurred children in the mirror. Every time his sister swallowed, she felt the phantom thread of sewn lips binding her own mouth shut. Across the table, Mr. Follings' gaze pinned them. He said nothing, but he did not need to. His eyes seemed to reach into their thoughts. The boy lowered his head, gripping his spoon, until his knuckles ached. The housekeeper moved about the table, pouring water, her steps soft, her face unreadable. Once, when she leaned near the boy, he heard her whisper beneath her breath, "Forget what you saw, or it will take you too." Her hand shook as she set the jug down, and for an instant he saw a scar along her wrist, pale and long, like a cut healed many years ago. She quickly pulled her sleeve to hide it. That day the children were sent to the courtyard. The grass grew patchy and brittle. The trees surrounding it twisted. As though bent away from the house, they did not play. They stood in clusters, whispering only with their eyes. The boy saw the sharp-faced child from his first supper standing apart, hands tucked behind his back, his stare heavy with warning. When the boy approached the child, spoke without turning his head, "You should not have gone to the door. Now the house knows you." The boy's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" "The house knows me." The child's lips tightened. "It remembers every step, every word. It remembers you better than you remember yourself. Soon it will make you forget who you are." He turned his gaze then, and the boy nearly stumbled back, for his eyes were clouded milky, as if a film had grown over them. Though he was not blind, they looked like the eyes of someone staring into another world. That night the whispers returned, but louder. The boy pressed his hands to his ears, but it made no difference. They filled his head with memories that were not his own. He saw children, taken from churches, from burning houses, from wagons stranded by storms. He saw Mr. Follings' hand on each of their shoulders leading them into the estate, and he saw each one erased. Their names burned in a fire, their faces blurred in mirrors, their laughter swallowed until only silence remained. The boy woke screaming, his sister clutching his arm. But she too had seen something. Her dream was of a ledger, a thick book bound in black leather kept in Mr. Follings' study. She saw his hand dipping, a quill and writing not names but numbers, every child given a number as if they were cattle or coins. She whispered this to her brother, her voice trembling. "We are not children here. We are nothing but numbers." The boy shook his head, refusing to believe, yet deep inside he knew the truth of it, and he felt a sickness grow in him like a seed planted by the house. The next day he searched the halls, every corridor twisted like a maze, leading him back to places he did not intend to go. He passed the cracked mirror again and paused, for the reflection showed not just him but another boy standing beside him, a boy who was not there in the flesh. The figure turned its head slowly, and its mouth opened, though sewn shut. From behind the stitched lips came a muffled moan. The boy stumbled back, crashing into the wall. When he looked again, the reflection was only his own pale face. Breathless, he ran until he collided with the housekeeper. Her hands gripped his shoulders tighter than before, her eyes filled with a sorrow too heavy to hide. "Do you understand now?" she whispered. "This place feeds on them. On you. On me." She looked toward the staircase as if fearing Mr. Falling might descend at any moment. Her lips trembled as she added words he would never forget. Not all of us who serve him came here by choice. Before he could question her, she pushed him away and hurried down another corridor, leaving him in stunned silence. That night the children gathered again for supper. One chair at the table sat empty. The sharp-faced boy was gone. Mr. Falling lifted his glass and spoke only one sentence: "The house accepts its own." No one asked what happened. No one dared. But in the cracked mirror across the dining hall, the boy saw it clear. A 13th figure had joined the blurred children, its mouth sewn shut, and its face was sharp and thin. Rain lashed against the windows that night, the sound like fingernails clawing to get in. The children sat stiffly at the supper table, bowls untouched, eyes lowered. The empty chair where the sharp-faced boy once sat remained at the end. No one dared ask. No one dared breathe too loudly. Mr. Falling presided at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over them with the weight of judgment. He lifted his glass, but drank nothing. Instead, he smiled faintly, the curve of a man who knew secrets too heavy for the world outside. The boy felt the air around him tighten. He knew his turn would come. He knew the house had marked him since the night he opened the forbidden door. Later, when the children were sent to their beds, the boy slipped away. His sister followed close behind her bare feet, silent against the wooden floor. Together they moved like shadows down the corridor where portraits lined the walls. Faces of a stranger stared back at them. Yet when the boy looked again, the eyes in the paintings had blurred the way the children's faces blurred in mirrors. At the end of the hall, a heavy door waited. The study. His sister gripped his hand, her nails biting into his skin, but he pressed forward. Inside the study, the air smelled of wax and damp leather. Bookshelves towered on every wall, filled not with scripture or history, but ledgers bound in black. On the desk rested the one she had seen in her dream, a ledger, its pages yellowed and cracked as if touched by fire. They opened it with trembling hands, and the truth spilled before them. Numbers scrawled in neat ink, each followed by a description of hair color, height, weight, but no names, never names. Page after page, dozens, hundreds, some entries had a mark beside them, a small cross. Others had nothing, and those without the cross seemed endless. The sister traced a line with her finger and whispered, "These are the children, all the children before us." Boy swallowed hard, his stomach twisting. He turned a page and found words written not in ink but in something darker, something that had soaked into the paper like blood, taken to the house, taken to the walls, taken to the mirror. The words made no sense yet felt truer than the numbers themselves behind them. A floorboard creaked. The boy snapped his head up and saw the housekeeper standing in the doorway, her face drained of color. "You should not have come here," she whispered, though her eyes shone with pity. "Please help us," the girl begged, her voice trembling. "Tell us what he is doing." The woman closed her eyes, tears streaking her worn cheeks. When she spoke, her voice cracked like dry wood. "He made a covenant long ago, a bargain with the house itself. For every child taken in his name, the house gave him life, it gave him years, it gave him power." She opened her eyes, then filled with a hollow kind of shame. "I was the first." The boy stepped back, confusion and horror clawing at him. "The first? What her?" Voice sank low. "The first he erased. He took my name, my face. I serve him still because the house holds what I was. If I defy him, it devours me whole." The girl's breath caught tears streaming freely. But why the children? Why so many? The housekeeper's mouth trembled as though she wanted to answer yet could not. Her lips formed words, but only silence came out, as if her tongue had been bound by something unseen. She shook her head violently as though fighting against a force that controlled her, and then another voice filled the study. Deep, smooth, unmistakable. because the world forgets children, but the house remembers. Mr. Follings stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the flicker of candlelight. His face bore no anger, only calm certainty, as if he had expected them all along. The boy closed the ledger with a slam, clutching his sister's hand. Follings stepped forward slowly, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You have seen too much," he said softly, "but perhaps it is time you understand what it means to belong here." The candles sputtered out, plunging the room into darkness, and in the blackness the walls began to whisper. The study drowned in darkness as the whispers rose like a tide. The boy clung to his sister, her nails digging into his arm. The ledger lay on the desk, still open, its pages rustling, though no wind touched them. Mr. Follings' shadow lengthened across the floor until it swallowed their feet. His voice filled the room, steady and cold. "The world discards its children, but I take them, I give them purpose, I give them eternity." The boy's voice cracked in his throat. "You erase them, you steal their names, their faces, their lives." Follings' eyes gleamed faintly in the candle glow returning. "No, I preserve them. The house feeds, but it also keeps. Every child is part of the covenant. Their souls bound in these walls, they are never lost." His words slid like oil. But the boy saw the truth in the blurred faces in the mirrors, the muffled cries in the walls. He stepped back, pulling his sister toward the door, but it slammed shut as if the house itself obeyed its master. The housekeeper trembled in the corner, her lips moving in silent prayer. Follings turned to her with a look both cruel and tender. "You of all should know. There is no leaving. Your name is mine still." The woman covered her face with her hands, sobbing silently. The boy's sister spoke then, her small voice carrying more strength than her trembling frame. "If the house keeps them, then where is the sharp-faced boy? Where are the others we no longer see?" Follings' smile widened, though it never reached his eyes. "They are beyond reflection. Now the house has accepted them fully. They live within its bones." The children's whispers swelled louder, filling every corner of the room until the siblings' ears rang. Faces pressed faintly against the walls, shifting in and out of the plaster, mouths sewn shut, eyes wide with desperate warning. The boy grabbed the ledger from the desk, clutching it against his chest. If this is the covenant, then it can be broken. For the first time, Follings' face flickered with something like anger. His voice sharpened. "You cannot break what you do not understand." The house trembled as if stirred awake by his fury. Dust rained from the beams. Books slid from their shelves. The candles flared blue, and the children's whispers turned into a single howl. The boy's sister fell to her knees, covering her ears. Her brother dropped beside her, desperate, his hand still gripping the ledger. Through the shrieking he heard words, faint but distinct, not from Follings, not from the house, but from the children themselves. "Burn the book." The boy's breath caught. The whispers repeated louder. "Burn the book, burn the book." He looked at the fireplace at the far side of the study, its coals still glowing faintly. Follings stepped forward, sensing his thought. No, the house roared in unison, shaking the walls. The boy staggered to his feet, dragging his sister with him. He ran toward the hearth, clutching the ledger tight. The heat licked at his skin as he lifted the book above the flames. But before he could release it, Follings' hand clamped around his wrist like iron. "Do you think destroying pages will return what was given? This house was built on the covenant. Its stones, its beams, its very air are soaked in it." The boy cried out, struggling. His sister clawed at Follings' arm, her small fingers tearing skin, but the man did not flinch. The housekeeper suddenly rushed forward, her face twisted with defiance. She shoved Follings hard, breaking his grip for a heartbeat. "Burn it, child." Her voice cracked, but it cut through the howl. The boy hurled the ledger into the fire. For a moment nothing happened. Then the book burst into violent flame, its pages curling into ash. The children's screams tore through the house, louder than thunder, shaking every wall, every window. The plaster split, the mirrors shattered. The faces within them writhed and screamed, their sewn mouths ripping open with bloodless tears. Follings bellowed in fury, his figure shuddering like smoke in a storm. His skin paled, his eyes hollowing, until he looked less man and more shadow. The boy shielded his sister as sparks flew from the hearth, The housekeeper fell to her knees, clutching her chest, her eyes wide in both agony and relief. And then the whispers ceased. The silence that followed was worse. Too heavy. Two final Follings stood trembling, his form flickering against the firelight. He whispered with a voice barely human, "You have doomed them all," and the house shuddered once more as if preparing to reveal its last secret. The house groaned as if struck by an earthquake, beams splitting, plaster raining from the ceiling. The fire in the hearth roared high, swallowing the ledger until only ash remained. The boy clutched his sister tight, their faces lit by the violent glow. Mr. Folling staggered back, his tall frame collapsing inward like a dying star. His voice poured out hollow. "You fools. The covenant bound the children to eternity. Without it, they are nothing." The house trembled again, mirrors cracking one after another down the halls like the shattering of endless glass. The voices of the children filled the air, not in whispers now, but in screams of release. Each cry pierced the siblings like needles, yet carried strange relief, as if chains were breaking. The boy saw them, figures flooding the study, pale and blurred at first, then clearer with each heartbeat. Children of all ages stepping out of the walls, from the cracked mirrors, from the darkness itself. Their faces, once erased, now sharpening into fragile human form. Sister gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They are coming back." But the truth was not so kind. The children's eyes were wide with terror. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. When at last their voices returned, it was a single chorus of grief. "We have no names, we have no homes, we are nowhere." The boy understood then. Destroying the ledger freed them from Folling, but not from erasure. They existed only as fragments, shadows with no place to return to. Folling sank against the desk, his body unraveling, like smoke. His face twisted into a smile, both cruel and sorrowful. "The world never wanted them. I only gave the forgotten a place to stay." The boy's anger rose hot in his chest. "You trapped them. You trapped us." Folling's figure flickered one last time, then collapsed into nothingness, leaving only the echo of his words. "The house is me. I am the house, you cannot burn me." All silence fell. Then the house began to collapse. The children screamed as their forms scattered into streaks of light, vanishing into the cracks of the walls, the broken mirrors, the burning ash. One by one they disappeared, their faces dissolving like mist, until only the boy and his sister remained. The housekeeper crawled across the floor, her face contorted in pain. Her hand reached toward the siblings, her lips trembling. Go before it seals itself again." The siblings ran hand in hand through corridors shaking apart, plaster raining down, glass shattering underfoot. The front doors burst open before them, flung wide by a force they did not understand. Cold night air struck their faces as they stumbled into the courtyard. Behind them, the house roared one final time, and then fell silent. Its windows black, its roofline sagging into ruin, as if it had stood abandoned for centuries, not mere moments. The siblings turned, gasping for breath. But there was no sign of the other children, no sign of Mr. Folling. Only the empty shell of a house, already fading into shadow. The housekeeper stood in the doorway, her outline thin and wavering like smoke. Her eyes softened as she looked at them. She whispered with her final breath, "Remember us." And then she too was gone. The boy and his sister collapsed into the wet grass, clinging to each other as the night deepened above. Them the stars burned cold. The estate loomed silent on the hill, its windows blind. Days later, when villagers came, they found the siblings wandering along the road, half-starved, half-mad. When asked their names, they stared blankly. For though they remembered each other, they could not recall who they had been before the house. Their names were gone, burned away with the ledger. They grew older but never escaped the whispers. In every mirror they saw blurred faces watching. In every dream they heard the house groan. And when they spoke of the Folling estate, no one believed them. Records showed no land by that name. No man called Folling. No children adopted without birth certificates. It was as though it had all been erased. But at night, when The boy woke gasping. He heard them still. The voices of 12 children whispering through the dark. We have no names, we have no homes. We are nowhere. And he knew the house was waiting still. Somewhere beyond memory. Somewhere history had chosen to forget the end.